you need to make the scorecard actionable.
Yeah.
And to make it actionable is through deliverable programs. Think of programs as investments.
Yes.
I need to invest in distributors that are going to rise the tide for my business, for my distributor's business, and for my end customer. Everybody needs to be able to win out of this.
So Jay, we've been doing a lot of work on the manufacturing side recently, helping them develop scorecards for how they can evaluate and create stronger partnerships with distributors. And some of the things that are driving this and why it's so timely is, number one, manufacturers are looking for growth. Mm-hmm. They want unit volume growth, and they're trying to figure out which distributors that can help deliver the largest gains for them moving forward. But the other factor is they're looking to reset expectations, because so much has changed over the last 3 to 5 years with distribution in general. A lot of distributors have consolidated, a lot of distributors have entered new markets, are adding new product categories, so there's a lot of shifting going on in the landscape, or in the channel, if you will. So let's talk a little bit about scorecards. What are some of the things that manufacturers should be looking at as they go into actually developing their own scorecards here?
Yeah, it's a great timely topic. It's one of the things that we've been talking a lot about over the last several months with our manufacturer partners. Many of them still don't have distributor scorecards in place.
Yeah.
So I would say first, if you don't have a scorecard, now's the time to get a scorecard. Think about the criteria you want to set, but if you don't have one, get one. If you do have one, I would look at a few areas. One, that criteria. So think of the scorecard as, what are you going to measure success from your distributor partners with? And that might be a variety of different topics. I'm going to cover a few in a second here, but think of those topics that you want to cover and what's important to your business, or what's important to success in the market that better serves your end user. We say that a lot. The second is understanding the scoring of that criteria. How are you going to rate each one of those success factors with your channel partners? Okay, so let's dive into some of those criteria or channel partners, right? Some of those are really around ability to serve the market and capabilities. Think of that as your first set of criteria. Now, within that criteria, there might be several sub-criteria that you might have, 2 or 3 that support that, but are they capable? What infrastructure and what capabilities do they have? And can they reach and serve the market that you're going after? So think of that as one bucket that you want to have. The second bucket you would have is maybe that expertise. Knowledge. Do they have the inherent knowledge, the training, the resources to be able to deliver the message and the content and the information to the end user so they can make the right decision?
Yeah, and that's a big one, because so much is changing with technology and with product knowledge and training and people coming into the workforce. So yeah, that's a really big one.
And so if you think about those two, which I would call kind of foundational pillars, and then you kind of move into this third bucket, which is really around sales capabilities, right? Can they drive sales in the end market? Can they deliver the volume of opportunity, developing the pipeline, outreaching to those end users with a value proposition and story, constantly engaging with that end market, and then driving sales with that, right? Which benefits the distributor, of course, in the form of profit and growth, but also supports the manufacturer strategy of today, which is unit volume growth.
Yeah, and so much of that has changed too, just with digital and a lot of digital selling teams now, a lot of inside selling teams, not just field anymore. So a lot has changed there.
Right. And the fourth one I want to leave you with is this idea about integration and cost to serve. Because this has become one of the hot topics or timely topics of today's market. Is the distributor in a position to lower the cost of serve, and are they fully integrated with us as a manufacturer to be able to deliver that service? And integration are things such as billing, data sharing, ERP, customer information, persona definition out in the marketplace, all of the elements that the manufacturer and distributor need to properly go and serve that end customer with a solution that they need is critical. The cost to serve is a second component of that. Are we lowering our costs to deliver those solutions? I mean, driving solutions out in the market and piling on cost on top of that doesn't necessarily drive growth and profitability for the distributor, and it kind of puts a sour taste in everyone's unit volume growth because it costs you a whole bunch more money to get it.
Yeah.
So that cost to serve is a big piece too.
That's a great point. Cost to serve is very popular with distributors looking at cost to serve for their customers, but probably not as common with manufacturers using those same principles and the cost to serve working with given distributors and whatnot. Great point. So when you look at this, you've got your scorecard, you got your criteria. A lot of it's market back, a lot of it's customer centric, and we'll say qualitative in nature, some of it, right?
Yeah.
It's not all quantitative. So when you've got this scorecard, what do you do with it thereafter?
So best practice of what we see is the manufacturers will take that scorecard and then they'll list out all the distributors by region, by territory, by market, by segment, whatever criteria they want to use, and they'll organize them and say, okay, how do they perform in each one of these areas? Now, traditionally, what you'll see in a scorecard is red, yellow, green, right? Something like that. It says, well, they're green, they're yellow, they're red. And I've never been able to make any sense of that over the years, ever.
It's because you're colorblind.
I am colorblind, but I have no idea what that means. But what does make sense is let's assign a value. Let's assign a quantitative value, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever that is, and say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, they rank as a 1 or a 3 or a 5 in certain categories. Now, to do that, you got to define the scale and define the categories. It takes a little bit of effort, but when you do that, you're able to truly kind of get an unbiased view of the performance. Now, some of your best distributors, you typically rank as high volume, high sales, maybe high profit, right, for your business. But the reality is they may fall down in other areas that you didn't realize because maybe they don't have the market reach. Maybe they don't have the internal capabilities as you thought they would. So for those distributors, they might rank high in some areas and low in others. And often what we see with our manufacturer partners is say, oh, that's kind of eye-opening. Rarely do we see 5s across the board.
Yeah.
You'll see 4 or 5s and then, ooh, that's like a 1 or a 2. So now the question is now where do you focus? But that next step is to really quantify that.
Yeah.
When you quantify that, you'll be able to build a proper heat map. And then you can see where your gaps are and your challenges are. And you can see where you are maybe underserving the market or where your investment should be applied.
Yeah, and I think that's when it starts to illuminate really where the gaps are and what you need as a manufacturer and where some of your distributors are falling short. And this is done at an individual distributor level, but how do you tend to take it and then roll it up a level from there? Yeah,
so when you break it down by distributor, it's a very micro view. And you're looking at distributor A and you're saying, okay, here's how they perform, but there's really no context there.
Yeah.
Because even if they score what you might consider as below your expectation, it still may be better than 90% of your other distributors. So it's relative in that context. What we would say is you have to look at it through the lens of the segment they serve, the product category that they serve with you, right? The territory or the region they are in. Are they local? Are they national? Are they global in some cases, in some ranges? But overall, use some criteria to kind of understand that. But you need to define those success factors for those distributors as well.
Yeah.
And what we mean by that is KPIs have to be set to say, what does success look like in the future? So we've identified gaps. We can see those gaps, but we organize those against their peers or against our objectives. Yeah. And then from there, we kind of set those KPIs and success factors for future expectations or future growth.
Yeah, and that's when you zoom out and you see a completely different picture, not necessarily at an individual distributor level, but you're seeing it across segments at a product level, but also segments at the type of distributor as well, right?
Yeah, and a funny story, when you see a manufacturer and they come back and say, we didn't realize that this group of distributors are performing or have more gaps than group A. So call them cohorts. Yep. Cohort A, B, and C of your distributor. Cohort A is your top ones, high revenue, but they have these glaring gaps and glaring holes. And then you look at cohort B, solid revenue, but they're not considered your A stars. But their gaps are very different. Yeah. And you say, whoa, okay, I was surprised. If I enable my B cohort, my B group, if I give them a little bit more attention, they can probably perform as good as my A and have less gaps than my A group. So looking back to your point of that, hey, we might be able to do things differently with these different groups and make different investments, and then you might be better parity. One of the things that manufacturers tend to see quickly is the disparity between the top and the bottom of the distributors.
Yes, very much so.
It's obvious when you do this.
Yeah.
And no manufacturer wants that. They really want all the distributors perform at the same level as much as possible. Now, a local distributor is not going to perform as strong as a national distributor, but you want some parity there, like, rise, get some, expectations, so there isn't such a large gap between them.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of local versus regional versus national. I think that it's never like one segment is stronger in all areas. It's
right.
Certain segments are strong in certain pieces of criteria. And so you can actually support those segments of distributors with better programs to help reshore their capabilities or help improve their capabilities in new ways. So I think that's the part that's really fascinating to me, at least, is understand those gaps, understand what patterns emerge across segments, but then come in with programs that actually help execute it. So let's talk a little bit about some of the programs you now use with the scorecard.
Yeah, and that's a great tie-in here. You need to make the scorecard actionable.
Yeah.
And to make it actionable is through deliverable programs. Think of programs as investments.
Yes.
I need to invest in distributors that are going to rise the tide for my business, for my distributor's business, and for my end customer. Everybody needs to be able to win out of this. So some of the programs will be data sharing, right? Is there information that's flowing back and forth between the distributor and the manufacturer to better serve, whether it's sales data, persona data, market data, demand, market sizing, market share, usage, all of that information is a great program to enact that scorecard and put it into practice, right? That's a clear, easy one. Other ones would look like, as a distributor, are you, what does your infrastructure look like, right? A program of moving product efficiently or as close to the end user as possible. That's another program that we see very popular today, is getting the product as close to the end user as possible.
Yeah.
Whether that's staged there, whether it's delivered quickly, but nobody wants to wait a long time. Nobody wants to have something on back order. So product availability, close to the end user, using a scorecard to really kind of drive the behavior of market expectation and customer performance.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of situations where manufacturers jump right into program planning.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily connect the dots between which distributors are actually going to perform the best and what types of programs some distributors need in order to be successful. So putting the scorecard first and then program development thereafter is a winning combination.
It is, and another point on that is capabilities play such an important role in scorecard.
Yeah.
When you look at a scorecard, it's this kind of the snapshot of this is how it's going today. But the expectation is there's improvement that you want to see. That today's 5 is not tomorrow's 5 on the scoring.
Yep. Nothing's static.
It's not static. And there's this belief that hey, once a great distributor, always a great distributor. And that's never always the case. But the same is true for a distributor. Once a great supplier, always a great supplier. And we know that's not true either. Right? Suppliers fumble the ball sometimes and they don't become great partners every once in a while. It happens. But I think the moral of the story here is that it's not static, it's constantly evolving and changing. But capabilities about where they are today and future capabilities are really important to understand, because as the distributors evolve, so are the manufacturers.
Yeah.
No one's just sitting still. So constantly reevaluate. Relook at these scorecards. Do it every year, every 6 months. Anything less than that is not important. Don't do it every 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? But constantly look at these scorecards, take an objective look at them, and really just take an honest view and say, this is where it is. But also, if your goal is to drive 15% growth as a manufacturer in unit volume growth, are your distributor partners in a position to be able to deliver 15% growth?
Yeah, yeah.
And your scorecard should reflect either that gap or that ability.
Yeah. Great points, Jay. A lot to take in, but If you're a manufacturing leader out there and you want to get more unit volume growth or more alignment with your distributors, starting with the scorecard is a great first step. Thereafter, move into program development.
Yeah.
And for all the distributors out there listening, understand some of the criteria that manufacturers are going to be using when they're doing their scorecards so that you can get into a better position with your manufacturing suppliers and get the best resources, the best programming, and the best funding you can from your supplier partners. Jay, thanks a lot for the insights. Great ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you liked what you heard and you want to put some of these insights to use across your team, please reach out to us at dorngroup.com. If you'd like to receive more insights like these for mastering channel performance as a manufacturer or a distributor, follow us on our LinkedIn and YouTube channels.